paint. And once we paint, then, really we're on the punch out phase, which is getting anything that may have gotten, paint overages, or we had scuffed walls or anything of that nature. And while those things are happening on the inside, we'll be, like you said, getting we got to get our plumbing connected, and we'll get our driveway situated and put up an additional fence. And while that's happening on outside, what I've already expressed will be happening on the inside, and that should take us to about 4 to 5 weeks or so.
So you can see that we have a structure. We have the property is there. It's up. But even in that 4 to 6 weeks, there's still a lot that has to be done. So, what are some of the things that people want to build for rental that are different than building for your home? So, one of the things we talked about was flooring,
right?
And so, instead of putting carpet in, we chose tile,
right?
So that as tenants change out, it's less upkeep. But what are some of the other things that you?
Sure. Well, the first thing is you have to make a clear designation from how you live and your quality of life versus what it is that you're building. And you want to be real clear on what I call your avatar, exactly who is the person that's going to be renting your property. And then you design that property based on that person or group or demographic. So it's very important to be mindful of that from a design perspective. Another thing to be mindful of is, I'm sorry. Yeah, sorry. What happened? What was the time? Oh, he's just saying we got 7 minutes. Okay.
Mr. Producer's in the background saying, y'all talking too long, you got 7 minutes to
Okay, gotcha. So you cut all this out?
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
What was the question? You said it's a question.
No.
It threw me out like it.
Don't cut this out. This is awesome.
No, cut this out, please.
I was asking the difference between building for yourself and...
Oh, yeah, gotcha. Okay, cool. So let's start back. So I can just start answering, or what do you need to do?
This is the part of
it.
When I listen to other podcasts, this is the part of the podcast I actually like.
Right. It would have gone off the wheels. Yeah.
So rewind.
Yeah.
So Tyron, what's the difference between building for a house that you're going to live in and building a house for rent?
Gotcha. A couple things. We're having plenty of fun here, right? You're making fun of me. So no, with all these outrageous outtakes, the biggest difference is understanding that this is not where you're going to live. And that doesn't mean that it's going to be a lower quality or standard. It just means that you need to design a property that's conducive to what your goals are. And so like one of the things we did in this property, in Kevin's house where he lived, it has carpet. Well, we didn't put that inside of the duplex because it's not very durable, excuse me. So you want to think about durability, you want to think about ease of maintenance, and then you want to, again, think about who your avatar is, who will be your potential tenant, and how do they live. And based on that, you design a product that's going to be suitable for them. So the primary difference when you're building your own property to live in versus a rental property is catering it to exactly what its purpose is.
So the other question I get, I've been getting about this duplex versus buying something existing, is the cost of rehab versus the cost to build from scratch on a per square foot basis, not including the land. And in my opinion, is that the cost to, let's say you're doing major rehab gut, starting from the studs, they're not that far apart.
Right.
Time is different.
Exactly.
I would assume that they're not that far apart.
Exactly. Yeah, the biggest hindrance or the biggest issue with doing rehabs or renovations versus new construction is the lead time that's associated with building from the ground up. So you have permits that you have to get. First, you got to design it. You got to figure out what you're going to build. Then you got to design it, get that approved, get it financed, then start to build. Whereas if you're renovating, you can kind of alleviate a few months and a few steps out of that process. So that particular aspect of it is very important to be mindful of. The other thing about it is when you're designing, what's the question?
the cost.
The cost.
Yeah.
Get off of these tangents.
Yeah.
So the other aspect
price
of
per
the cost,
square foot
price per square foot cost is related. The costs are very similar, but new construction.
As I said in the intro, I went out last night, not like to a club or anything, but just to a happy hour. My voice is still scratchy because of all the allergens that are in the air. I'm back in Houston. And by the way, a bit of a break, and I want to come back strong. So invited Tyron McDaniel with Houston Vintage Homes back to the show. If you guys have been following me, you know that he's been on the show. We talked probably about a year and a half ago. We had I think a two-part series. Tyron, we get to talking, and then all of a sudden we passed 30 minutes. But I wanted to have Tyron on the show today because he and I are doing a project together and things of that nature. So just as to explain what we're doing, I have owned 2 lots in the sunny side part of Houston. Those of you that are not from Houston, it's 288 South in kind of West Belford area, or Scotty West Belford, if you want to be more specific. And so I had always wanted to build duplexes, or really I wanted to build fourplexes, which
right?
But finally got to the point. I've been talking about this for 10 years, and other people have done it in the neighborhood.
Probably 15.
Yeah, exactly.
That's our secret.
Exactly.
We dated ourselves.
Yeah. It is. I want you to be the builder because you've been on so many rehabs and you've been building and consulting, and I trust you. And first and foremost, you have to trust your builder. So, long story short, we are now kind of here now 8 months into the process. From the time I gave him the plans to the time where we are now. So that's kind of what we're doing. We're building small multifamily. My goal is to build 20 of these over the next 5 years. That's my goal. So that's 3 to 4 for my own personal portfolio. And so this is another way to build a lot of people.
As good as can be said, but ultimately, to speak a little bit more to that, we've had conversations for years about developing our communities, if you will, and so this is just
the gold in the hood.
Exactly, right? There's gold in the hood, right? And so, it was just time. It was just time. When you look at what's happening in the market, when you look at the prices of land in some of our communities, and so you got the plans, you did all the things you need to do, and so it was just time for us to actually get this started and move this in from the idea and conception phase into, having these properties built out. And, a great segue into this is you talked about, these being built.
The units are approximately 1,150 square feet, and those rents for those units over there are probably around, I'm gonna say conservatively, $1,300. So you're talking about $2,600 in rental income once it's leased out. It's not costing me that to build it, and that's with not only the cost of the build, but also with the builder's fees in there. And so with that being said, it's almost like buying an investment property where you have a significant amount of equity in it going forward, but you just have to wait 6 to 9 months to build it, right? Exactly. So it's not like finding an immediate deal. And that 6 to 9 months, in my opinion, is where people kind of like,
exactly.
They want instant gratification.
Exactly.
Patient money is mixed money.
Very much so. That 6 to 9 months is where the value is created. At the end of the day, there's opportunity costs with any place that you're going to place your money or was, and so we've crafted a product that will allow you to be, maximum profitability and have a nice chunk of equity. So it's a great return on investment.
Yeah, I think the other thing I'd say is, and by the way, what a bit of flipping and purchase to rent rehabs. Right. By the way, shout out to you can go to flip a house.
Actually, flipware.com.
Flipware.com. He has a whole line on just flipping houses, like t-shirts and underwear, whatever you got. You got flipware.com.
Just check it out.
Yeah, right. Just check it out. Flipware.com. Shout out to flipware.com. But what's in your mind as a builder, investor, what's the difference between rehab construction and new construction?
Well, I'll say,
Because, by the way, in his rehabs, I call him Lazarus.
Yeah.
Because he'd literally be bringing stuff that you would be like, I'm telling you.
He's on the dot.
You know what I'm saying? And all of a sudden, it's new. So.
The first thing about building from the ground up is easier than doing rehab. And the primary reason is because when you're building, like in this case with this duplex, everything is being accounted for in the budget because we know we're starting with nothing. Whereas in a renovation where most people have challenges, it's all what we call those ahas or those gotchas, those things behind the wall, under the foundation, somewhere that you didn't see or the inspector didn't cover, or maybe it just never came up, and now becomes an issue which causes you to go over your time frame or over budget. So it's easier to build new construction than it is to renovate because of those hidden gotchas, and it's also a little bit easier for your contractors to get in and get out because you deal with
new things that you learned on this particular duplex project that you didn't already know?
Yes. One of the beautiful things about real estate, especially for people like myself and Kevin, our attention spans can be short sometimes, and so we like new, we like, for lack of better words, we like challenges.
Right.
And so every process, every project we do, there are lessons that we learn. Real estate has an amazing way of keeping you humble because right when you think you figure everything out, then you run into a situation you've never had before. Mm-hmm. And so even with this, there's a new code that came out, and with the nuances of how this property was designed, it's a two-story property. So on the flooring, you have options when you're getting a property designed or built. You can have what they call open web floor trusses, or you can use 2x12s. Now, there are different advantages. Open web floor trusses are basically they're open web. So
and give them space to work. And so I would hope he would say that I haven't really been bothering him. I'll send him a text every once in a while, or if an issue comes up with me, he'll send me a text. But and I do drive by, and I try to go in. One other thing,
we lock them out.
Yeah, exactly. Well, that's another kind. If you go build in the hood, a quick caveat, pause in this. If you go build in the hood, you got to have a good security, right? Security, and some stuff don't come up missing. And
it's still the hood.
Yeah. So we done had some shrinkages. He gave me this word. This is called. And I was like, so I'm like, oh my gosh, they're stealing stuff. And he's like, yeah, man, look, you build in the hood, you're gonna have shrinkage. Exactly. So it's not called stealing. It's called shrinkage.
It's shrinkage. That's it.
And so, but I'm thinking budget because it's indirectly.
Right.
I'm paying him, he's paying them, but indirectly, it's my money. So I'm like, oh my gosh. And so anyway, I'll come back to the shrinkage. But long story short, I think you have to give people space. Still check on your stuff, and it's still a business relationship.
Inspect what you expect.
Exactly. And then, I'll give an example. I didn't even think about this. I went by there, I was looking at, I took pictures. A couple weeks later, I'm looking, I was like, wait a minute, if they want cable, or where they are satellites, most of the time in a rental property, you want satellites, where are they going to plug in? And so I text Tyron and said, hey, when your guys did the electrical, did they put in the connections for cable or satellite? He's like, no, sir. That was exactly what he said. Nope, that wasn't in the budget, so no. Right. So I have a trade that has done some of that type of work at my house, and so I said, hey, I'd like to send him out there to get a quote. And the reason is that if you get a chance to see these pictures or go by this project, Tyron's done a really massive job of making this look very good, unique for the area. To me, it's bringing up the block. And so I would just hate to do all this work and then attend, because the law of Texas Property Code requires that you get an opportunity to put a satellite up. I love the cable, satellite, and I didn't want to mess up the product. I say all that to say that you still have to be able to check on your stuff and ask questions, because at the end of the day, you're a client, but you still have to be able to work with your.
Well, certainly, and I think there's several points that we can extrapolate from that. Number one is when you're building, a lot of times they call them change orders. So obviously change orders, you're changing something and it's going to affect your property. You can look at it and tell that it's a rental. And so one thing that was big for me is, I wanted us to be able to look back at this property and be very proud 5 years from now, 10 years from now of what we've built. And so one of our philosophies at Houston Vintage Homes is our rentals don't look like rentals. And so this feature was something that continues along that same vein of making sure that this property looks like, doesn't look like a rental property. And another thing about working cohesively, if you will, with a person that you're building your property with, that's important is having that open line of communication and expectation. You know, you started off talking about the person who kind of called every single day. And so what happens is Kevin and I have background in of history, if you will, so that makes it a little bit easier for us to work. But generally, I like to be proactive in the communication. So the last time he responded to me and got out to me before I was able to send him a most recent update, but we like to be ahead of the communication cycle. And so what I would say to you is if you're building a project or preparing in your planning process, talk about what I call the communication plan. How soon should you expect to get updates on the property? And once you know what to expect, then that can kind of lead to where it is, you know, when you have material or product out on your site and it literally gets legs. You go there, you leave it there on that evening, 4:30, 5 o'clock, the material's there, you get there the next morning, or in our case, the trade calls and says, hey man, you know, all the siding that we need is, you know, you need to deliver. I'm like, no, it's already there. It's just inevitable. It's a part of it. But we've had some extreme shrinkage work. We had 2x12s that were 20 feet long stove. Now think about that. It's 2 inches thick, 12 inches wide, and 20 feet long. We had about 4 of them, and each one of these boards are about 75, 80 pounds. So that means that they weren't concerned about time. And, you know, they could load this up and things of that nature. I say all that to say, one, you gotta have a security system, whether that's some cameras, lights. It's also good to utilize your neighbors as allies. So in this particular property, matter of fact, 3 of our neighbors are allies for us. So whether that's letting us use water, power sometime, but they also keep an eye on the property. But at the end of the day, we still experience shrinkage. And again, you take the precautionary measures you can, be a security, going to your property. One of the things I do with all of our projects is I'll show up at random times just to throw off anyone who may be watching the site. So if I wake up one night at 3 o'clock in the morning and it's okay with my wife, I'll shoot out to one of the projects and hang out for a little while. If there's, we've had law enforcement stop by our project and just check on us and things of that nature. So it's good to make connections with those individuals, let them know the positive impact you're making in the community property. So those are just some proactive measures you can take, but it's kind of sort of part of the process, if you will. So
he had this really good to me.
Yeah.
I wanted to go. Just the way I wired. It's just tricks that you got. Something with boys and males.
I have no idea what you're talking about.
Right. Getting fancy up. Well, so we are. You basically broke ground in June, let's just say, right?
Yeah.
We are in August. Today is August 2nd. And we are essentially, I'm not gonna say finished with the outside, but you still gotta do covers and all that kind of stuff. But essentially, the building is there. So from now where we are waiting for an inspection so we can start doing the sheetrock to finish, what are some of the steps, and then how long do you think it'll take?
Sure. All things being equal, from where we stand right now, it's really about 4.5 to 5 weeks. All things working perfectly. Right. But we're in building, so nothing works perfectly, right? Yeah.
They always gonna put that little counter.
Right, exactly. And the reason being, one of the caveats to that is, you know, like in this case, Kevin primarily talks to me, but there are, from now to the end of this project, not even counting the guys that got us here, but from now to the end of this project, there's no fewer than probably 7 individual trades that I will work with. And that's outside of the vendors who are going to supply the materials in addition to the actual workers. So let's just say there's about 30 to 35 people that I and my partners or employees will communicate with that he knows they exist, but I'm responsible for being able to do it to get him the information or whatever needs to be communicated. My point in saying that is all of these people have to be orchestrated and scheduled, and so it just becomes organized chaos and confusion sometimes to accurately predict who's going to be where at what time like they should. So that's why there's always a little bit of variance when you're building. But from where we stand right now, the next thing we'll do is we'll get sheetrock up. So we'll complete our inspection today. The sheetrock guys will most likely get started on Monday. Once the sheetrock goes up, we tape and float and get what we call a nice little smooth finish of texture on that sheetrock. Then the next thing we'll do is we'll start trimming.